was in the military for about 8 years, and I've never checked my prior medical history. You know, they do a lot of medical history on you in the military. And after, you know, I went back and looked at some of my prior military records, and my platelet was low. But the good thing that came out of it was it caused me to reflect on the things that I was doing to make sure I was eating or living what I would call a whole food plant-based diet. And I didn't know because, you know, they taught you in school you got to eat the food pyramid. You know, you got to eat some meat, you got to eat some dairy, you got to eat all these things. You got to exercise. At least I was doing that right. And so after got that report, and I started doing my own research trying to figure out what caused your platelets to be low. And I saw this. I don't remember what the organization was. I said that it might have been from the Vegan Society in Hawaii. I saw this lady who was a vegetarian. She was giving a presentation, and she said she'd been vegetarian for like 20 years, and her platelets were low. And she said, I gave up dairy, and my platelets improved. It was still in the low normal range, but at least it was in that range. It was, you know, prior to giving up dairy, it was in the low range. Because, you know, a lot of vegetarians still eat dairy. And so she said, I gave it up, and my blood levels improved. So I was like, huh. So I'm like, okay, I could do that, because I was only eating yogurt at the time. You know, no cheese, and cheese and yogurt I was eating. And so, okay, I could give that up. And so that was August 8th, 2015. And for those of you who have internet connections or watch YouTube videos, when you watch a video, they recommend something else for you to watch. It's like, okay, you like this, you may like this. And so, you know, and so I saw, there was one came up that was called Forks Over Knives. How many people have seen that? Yeah. And so I saw, and I went and I saw it on Netflix. And when I saw it, my mind was blown. I was like, are you serious? I can't believe I've been lied to my whole life. And that day, it was the 25th of August, because you could remember these dates. It's like, well, I'm not going to ever eat this food again. So 25th August 2015. I've never eaten any more meat or dairy or fish or anything. Went 100% whole food plant-based. And so the transition was easy, because to me, if you're telling me that this food causes cancer, this food causes diabetes, this food causes heart disease, then to me it's poison. There's no point in eating it. So this presentation is some of the things that I've learned from doing research and following some of, I would say, my informal medical mentors.
Calville, can you stay that way a little bit? No,
Sure.
that
Yeah,
way.
this way? Okay. Yeah. Oops.
Thank you.
Did I mess that up?
No, that's good.
So my informal medical mentors, you might have known some of them from those of you who are on this journey. But before I go any further, is everybody here a vegetarian, vegan, or whole food plant-based? All vegetarians?
Yeah.
Vegan.
So vegan?
I'm working on it.
You're working on it. Okay, good. So, you know, what I found out, and I'll talk about some of the studies that I've seen and the benefits, obviously, you might have known of a whole food plant-based diet. But just to go back on mine, in 2015, even though, like I said, I felt healthy, I was doing everything. After I switched to a whole food plant-based diet, and one of the good things was I did a baseline medical test, because I was going through it the whole time. And my cholesterol, even though I thought I was doing everything right, was 209, my total cholesterol. LDL, I believe, was 100 something. And I had pre-hypertension. Wasn't high blood pressure, but was pre-hypertension. And after switching to a whole food plant-based diet, I went back a year later, my cholesterol went from 209 to 135.
Wow.
No medication, no pills. Blood pressure came down into the normal range. You know, I've seen some, I had to stop. That's how I met Dee. I stopped running. I used to run. I played tennis. I had to stop playing tennis because I started having inflammation in my joints. And so I got into cycling. And so that's how I met Dee. I got into cycling because that's low impact on the joints. Now, fast forward to today, I'm running, I'm playing tennis, still riding, and I exercise 5 days a week. In fact, I was telling Dee On Sunday, for example, I got up in the morning, I rode 28 miles on my bike. I went and played tennis for 2.5 hours. Then I went back home and worked outside digging a pit for 2.5 hours out there in the backyard, and still have energy for the rest of the day, go to work.
You
And
must
so
worship on Sunday, on Saturday.
yeah. So if you need any evidence, so this is, so I don't need, from my perspective, I don't need any more testimonials. I don't need another study, because to me, I'm living evidence that it works. You know, there's no, I'm 55 now. And so there's no doubt in my mind, because I am by myself, it's a one-person story, N of one. It shows that a plant-based diet, it can reverse heart disease, improves all biomarkers, and we'll talk about it as we go forward. But just a little bit of disclaimer, as you know, like I said, you know, this is for this presentation is for informational purposes. You know, so just to make sure that you know you have to listen to your doctor. You know, of course, and make sure that you follow in practice. If you're taking medication, don't just stop taking your medication. You know, my advice: if your doctor doesn't believe in this approach, find a plant-based doctor.
That's right.
You know, yeah.
Do we have any around here?
That's what I know.
There is actually a doctor. I think there are a few. There's a Dr. Cardwell. I actually looked him up on the internet. I sent him an email, and he said his practice was full. He was taking in patients. But there's a website called plantbaseddoctors.com.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you Google plantbaseddoctors.com. In fact, my doctor before, like up to last year, I went all the way to Chattanooga to go to a plant-based doctor,
Wow.
and she's full MD. And practice, I was like, I want to go to a real doctor, you know, lifestyle medicine doctor. MD, has all the credentials, prescribed medication, whatever, but she's on a plant-based diet. So she knows that, you know, the benefit of a plant-based diet. So yeah, so they're there. So if you remember, like I said, plantbaseddoctor.com, and they're all throughout the United States.
Okay.
Alabama, unfortunately, in the South, you find a lot less. You go to Atlanta, Chattanooga, you know, you'll see them there mostly. All right, cool. So this is living a whole food plant-based diet lifestyle, and it may optimize your health. Like I said, no result is guaranteed, but from my experience, this food right here is great. If you keep your food as close to nature makes it as possible, you know, keep your food close to nature makes it as possible, you will reap the most health benefits. All right, great. So I don't know how many people ever heard of the blue zones. Anybody ever heard of the blue
Can you
zones?
move it right there?
Yeah.
Stay.
So a quick.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Quick, like a little story on the blue zones. So blue zones are regions, 5 primary regions around the world, where this author, his name is Dan Buettner, went around the world and studied these people. They have the longest longevity. Most of them live to be in their hundreds, in their 90s, and they're still healthy, still doing their day-to-day activity, and they are mostly a plant-based diet. In fact, the first one at the top, Loma Linda, is in California. They are 100% vegans, and they have the longest lifespan in the U.S. up until today. There's several studies going on. There's one called the Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 1 and the Seventh-day Adventist Health Studies 2. For about 40 years, where they've been tracking these people over time. In fact, there was, they said it's not unaccustomed to go there and see people still mowing their lawns in their 80s and 90s, still driving, doing day-to-day activities. So what I want to focus on is, like I said, that what I call the pillars of health. Now there are many different, different ways of presenting it, but to me, they live in like very rural areas. They don't have gyms. So they are forced to move and stay active all day. Right? They have social engagement, kind of what I talked about with the community. And
It's all right.
one of the food that all 5 group A are continue to eat is legumes. Yes. Beans. So anybody tells you that beans, I think I've seen they have an infomercial where this doctor is saying bean has lectin. So you should stay away from beans.
I'm gonna get some beans.
You know, like maybe once, maybe Thanksgiving, they may have some flavor and once a month, but not the way we do it in the West, where we have it every day, three times a day,
Right.
and it's the largest portion on the plate. All right, cool. So we'll focus primarily on nutrition, exercise, proper rest, and community. So it's a pillar. It's not just nutrition. Nutrition is important, but so are the other activities, as you can see even from this Blue Zone studies. All right, cool. So let's go focus on nutrition. So my little diagram there says whole food. And like I said, I must say I really enjoy the food again. This was really good. That's how I like to eat, plain, whole food, plant-based diet. And so nutrition should be centered around whole foods, plant-based. And so there's, you know, I've heard a lot of people say they're on plant-based. We were talking about it earlier. But there's a mixed notion about that. To me, whole food plant-based is close to God or nature makes it as possible. Take the potato out of the ground, you cook it. You don't need to do anything with it. It has everything. How many people have ever heard of John McDougall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talked about the starch solution and whole food plant-based. You know, you eat it just like it comes out. So the 5 main food groups that we all should strive to get, you know, to eat on a regular basis: vegetables, legumes, grains, nuts, seeds, and fruits. On this slide, I just kind of want to, I have a little study there. So most of these information I've gotten from nutritional studies and nutritional science. Some of them I cite the source. So on this, for example, on this one, this came from the NIH. Everybody familiar with the NIH?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So then
Used
they,
to work there.
oh, really? Okay, great. So the NIH is the National Institute of Health. It's actually the U.S. government organization, financed by the U.S. government. And they give grants to universities and different organizations to perform all type of studies: nutrition studies, cancer research. And so one of the good things about the NIH is, since it's our tax money, they're not influenced by industry. So when you see a study, you have to ask yourself the question, who funded this study? Because what they've found out is that more than 2/3 of the studies that are funded by industry comes out in favor of industry.
Yeah,
Man.
that's true.
And if it's not favorable, they don't report it, right? Because they're trying to sell you the product. So if it's not in their favor, they don't report it. So you have to be very suspicious. You have to, as they would say, follow the money. So this study right here talks about, you know, how to, the benefits are the low interventions that you have or may encounter while you're on a whole food plant-based diet. A lot of people want to lose weight. And so low body mass index. So that means you lose weight if you eat properly. Of course, it's no guarantee, because everybody ever heard of the food calorie density? So for example, you know, avocado is whole food. But if you eat a lot, avocado is very high in fat.
Yeah.
A lot of calorie, yeah. So nuts are good for you, but you don't want to eat a pound of nuts a day. You know, stuff like oil. Oil is, you know, there's a lot of controversy about oil, but oil is a processed food and it's highly calorie dense. Doesn't matter what type of oil. If it's olive oil, it's coconut oil, doesn't really matter. It's a processed food that's taken out from the whole food. And like I said, the focus is on whole food. So you could eat the coconut, not the coconut oil. In fact, there's a study that just came, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, that showed that coconut, eating coconut oil, probably saw there was a big, you know, push recently about how great coconut oil is and it has MCT and it has a lot of saturated fat. And they have shown that, but coconut oil and any food that has high saturated fat, it raises your LDL cholesterol. And you know the LDL cholesterol is the bad cholesterol. So it lowers the good cholesterol and it raises the bad cholesterol, coconut. So even though it's, you know, because it's extracted from the food, it's a processed food. So just bear in mind, like I said, you know, whole food plant-based diet also reduces, you know, for most people reduces your blood pressure, blood sugar, which is your A1C. You know, also it's good for you know, control blood sugar. cholesterol, like I just said, and it's very cost effective. I've heard a lot of people say, man, eating vegan or it's expensive. Well, it's like, it's expensive if you're buying fake food, processed food. If you're eating out a lot, beans are not expensive.
No.
Potatoes are not expensive. Rice are not expensive. If you keep it close to nature, makes it as possible. To me, it's very cheap. I must say, well, obviously you have to plan ahead. You have to prepare. You prepare in batches. That makes it a lot easier. But in terms of cost, to me, it's very affordable. In fact, it's a lot cheaper than even this cheap McDonald's, dollar menu. It's cheaper because I was just thinking. I went to Aldi's, and I'm always looking for a deal. So I went to Aldi's. They have like 10-pound potatoes for like $3 something. What? $3 something for a 10-pound bag of potatoes, right? That could feed a whole family for a whole week. Alright, cool. So these are some of the benefits of eating, and this is some of the benefits of eating a whole food plant-based diet. Alright, cool. The next one we'll go into is exercise. And as you may know, like I mentioned earlier, all the blue zones they stay active throughout the day. There's a phrase, I don't know if you all ever heard this, it's called NEAT, N-E-A-T. Everybody ever heard that phrase? It's an acronym, means non-exercise activity thermogenesis. What that means is that you don't have to go to the gym to get the benefit of exercise, right? If, for example, people who work in an office, we sit all day, 8 hours at the desk, we get in the car, we drove for maybe an hour and a half, we get home, we ate, we sit on the couch, and we watch TV, we go to bed. So if you count, we sit more than we move, right? And so what the NEAT is saying, you don't have to go to the gym to actually get the exercise. You mow your lawn, that's exercise. You clean your house. You go for a walk, around the neighborhood. Stuff like that. Like in the office, you get up, you use the restroom at the far end of the building. You go downstairs, you take the stairs, don't take the elevator. So you actually moving all day, you're still getting your exercise. But it's actually better to have a structured exercise program, so that means you demand that you do it. So you set a time in the day when I'm going to go for my walk, I'm going to do this, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the type of exercise. But here are some of the benefits from exercise. And so if you don't know, exercise affects every single molecule in your body. Every single molecule. It has shown to reduce, cardiovascular disease, controls blood sugar, cancer. In fact, I've seen even people who had cardiovascular disease have heart attacks, and they had bypassed after so many times where the cardiologist saying, yeah, after so many days you need to start going out, put a little bit of a stress on the heart so it gets stronger. It controls obesity, depression, osteoporosis, premature death. So exercise is, besides nutrition, is one of the most important things that we can do for our health. So the next thing I'll talk about is just give you a little idea of some of the type of exercises that you can do. Everybody know what a cardiovascular or aerobic exercise is? Yeah, so exercise that gets the heart, elevate your heart rate. Like I said before, if you've never exercised before, if you live in what we call a sedentary lifestyle, means you don't really move around, don't go out and push it too hard. It's best to get a physical first to know what your level of fitness is and take it slowly. But the recommendation from the CDC is for us, every American, to get at least 150 minutes of moderate exercise per week. And as simple as walking for 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And the good thing is they make it even easier. They say you don't even have to do all 30 minutes in one stretch. You can do 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Just try to get 30 minutes in per day. That's how much they make it for you. And if you make it a little bit more vigorous, like get the heart up, get a little sweat going, 75 minutes a week. That's the minimum. Now the more you can do, the better. But that's the minimum that you need to do to get the benefit out of it. Then besides aerobic exercise, the other piece is strength exercise. Especially as we age, there's this thing called sarcopenia, where we start losing muscle mass. So especially after age 55, from the studies I've seen, we lose 10% of your muscle mass every year. So what you need to do to maintain your muscle mass, besides the cardio, is to do strength exercise. Doesn't mean you have to go to the gym and lift 100 pounds. You do, if you can't do push-ups, go against the wall. You can do some push-ups, do some stretches, some squats, do stretching the legs. And so different forms of strength exercise work on the biggest muscles in the body. You want to aim for maybe 1 to 2 sets of reps. So for example, you find a weight or whatever you're working on to do at least 12 reps. So this is considered a rep, 12 reps, for each muscle group. And then you could do a lot more research, but just bear in mind, so you want to do strength training, and you want to do cardiovascular exercise. And like I said, there's absolutely every single cell in your body benefits from exercise. Okay, hopefully I'm not going too fast. And then feel free to ask a question as I go through. All right, another one that most people tend to ignore is rest. People, they'll stay up and they'll probably watch TV shows, sports. They go to bed at 12 and they wake up at 4. And so obviously that's not healthy, because when you sleep, or when we sleep, is when our bodies regenerate. All this short-term memory gets committed while we're sleeping. So we need to get proper rest, and that's when your body heals itself. In fact, some of the consequences of poor sleep and hygiene is obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and it shortens our life expectancy. Because our body, nature makes it, we need to get rest, the proper rest. Of course, that goes also for stress management. So proper rest is very, very important.
Calville, I have found that people who are very healthy, they eat good, they exercise really good, but then they stay up late, they end up coming down with a stroke.
Yes.
I've seen that over and over.
Yeah. So it's a whole balance.
Even Marcus, what was his name? Marcus, who was the guy that used to do the juice all the time?
Used to do what?
Malcolmus even had a stroke, and he stayed up very late.
Yeah.
Jim Fix
We've got to have that
wrote
sleep.
the book on running and died
Mm-hmm.
while he was running.
Oh, wow.
37.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So you could be doing what you consider is right, but you're still ignoring, very key component of health. Here are some of the benefits.